Good afternoon. I'm DawnJPaul, and welcome to Your Time. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. This is a very special show because this is our first show, and I'm so honored to have Brother Robert Muhammad joining us today. Brother Robert Muhammad is the Southwest Regional Student Minister of Mosque 45. He is an urban planner. He's a community leader and activist, and also host of Connect the Dots radio show. So I want to thank you, Brother Muhammad, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. I want to first start off a little bit about your background, because I believe to understand someone's character and who they are today, you have to understand where they came from. So I want to talk a little bit about your upbringing in the 1960s in New York. Did you grow up in a strict household?
Well, I grew up in a single parent household, and my mother was both mother and father. So she ruled with an iron fist.
Yeah.
I'm the youngest of three siblings. There are three of us. And my sister actually is my second mother.
Okay.
But my mother ruled with an iron fist. She worked two jobs. She did what she had to do. She made sure that I went to school, I was fed, I was clothed, I was housed, and that I was properly educated. And she gave me a moral compass to know right from wrong, and to love our people and to love black people in particular, but not to be exclusive of humanity. And this is the background that I grew up with in New York in the turbulent 60s and the 70s, as we were making a change from a segregated society into one in which we were trying to break down the walls of segregation and discrimination and come into a greater fullness of ourselves.
Also in the 1960s, though, you got to see firsthand the workings of Louis Farrakhan and Malcolm X. What were your feelings after Malcolm X separated from the nation?
Well, again, you've got to understand that I was born in 56. So for me, I was about 10, 11 years old. All I knew is by the discussions that were taking place with my older brother and my uncles and my grandparents, is that something was going on. The tragedy is that in 1965, February 1965, Malcolm X was assassinated. And the place called the Audubon Ballroom was a place that we used to walk by, because the Columbian Presbyterian Medical Center is where, when I broke my arm, I got it reset. When I got my first set of braces, that's where I went. And I also walked past there to go to various events there in Washington Heights. It's on Broadway, Washington Heights. But it was a place that was very eerie. It was a place of darkness. But the mood in Harlem, and that is that, in fact, a great man had died and something tragic had taken place. Witnessing the work of Minister Farrakhan as he came into a city that was divided, full of controversy, a lot of anger on both sides of the equation, on Malcolm's followers and those who remained loyal to the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And he came into that situation and he rebuilt that city and rebuilt the mosque, and in fact expanded it. So it's gone from one mosque through mosque number 7A all the way through 7T. And he had schools, businesses, and Minister Farrakhan was on the radio, and it was a very vibrant city, and he did a great work. So that was witnessing that. And even if you weren't in the mosque, you admired the Muslims, you respected the Muslim sisters, you loved the businesses, you loved the carrot cakes and the bean pies and the fish sandwiches and the steak and take stores.
Right.
And so long before we ever had you buy, we fry. The Muslims actually controlled the fish business, because at that time the Muslims were the largest importers of frozen fish in the country under the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So this is what I grew up with witnessing. Though I wasn't in the mosque, I witnessed and had a great respect for the Muslims, because my grandmother lived right around the corner from Mosque number 7. As Mosque number 7 was on 116th Street and Lenox Avenue, my grandmother lived on 117th Street and 7th Avenue, which is one avenue over and one block south, so north of the mosque.
Even though you were very young when Malcolm X died, what were your feelings after knowing that he was killed by a black Muslim?
What was very difficult for me was the fact that that a black man would kill another black man, period. Whether it was a Muslim or not is a whole nother story, because the real story still hasn't gotten out. They caught one man at the scene, And he signed an affidavit eventually naming the other co-conspirators that participated in it. Yet the FBI will not reopen Malcolm's assassination. A murder has no statute of limitations. So why won't they reopen the case since we already know who they really are, who really killed them? The two other brothers that went to prison never were involved, but yet they were convicted. So who are these other perpetrators, and what are their connection with the government? And we all know that the Nation of Islam, Dr. Martin Luther King and the SCLC, the Black Panthers, and all of our organizations at that time were honeycombed with hypocrites and agents of the government. And through the COINTEL program of J. Edgar Hoover, we were manipulated. That's not to say that black people were not involved in it, knowingly or unknowingly. But we have to say that the hidden hand behind it came out of Washington, D.C. and was funded by our tax dollars. So yes, it saddened me that black people would kill black people. But I was also saddened by the death of Dr. Martin Luther King. Though I don't agree or didn't agree with necessarily with the philosophy that people ascribed to him of one of integration. He was one who wanted to desegregate it, but he wanted equal justice under the law. And we flipped that into what we call integration, where we forced ourselves where we weren't wanted. And that is something that I think that we've hung on him, when really Dr. King at the end of his life wrote a book called Community of Chaos. Where do we go from here? He died working with the garbage men in Memphis, Tennessee. When he was assassinated, he went down there to support the garbage men who went on strike in 1968. And also, we need to recognize the fact that Dr. King was planning a poor people's march in Washington, D.C. So he had moved beyond civil rights into economic and human rights. And as he became a world and international figure, at that point he was assassinated. So again, we have these men frozen in time. They both were in their 30s. Malcolm was in his 30s, and Martin Luther King was in their 30s. And yet today, if they were alive and around with us today and they were in their 80s, what would we be saying about them today?
You were appointed by Minister Farrakhan in the mid-90s as the Student Southwest Regional Representative.
Yes.
What qualifies one for that position?
Well, I had longevity. At that point, I had been minister of the local mosque, one of the largest mosques in the South and the Southwest, since 1987. And though I was appointed in 1994, prior to the Million Man March, and so I had been shown myself to be capable, competent, and qualified to be over a large mosque and the fourth largest city at that time. And so Minister Farrakhan then decided to place me over the Southwest region that had been created or organized by my predecessor, Brother Carl Muhammad. And so I'm over not only Texas, but Louisiana, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and New Mexico. So I'm over 5 states. And the qualification basically is, first of all, you have to be a believer, and then you have to be a competent administrator and one who has the capability to multitask. So I have that, or I'm growing into that.